You know, Nolan's not here this week. He's on assignment, and he sat down with newly elected Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Bridget McCormack. She talked about perceptions of partisanship on the court and what we should expect from our court system. Take a look.
You were nominated by the Democratic Party and lean Democrat on a court that is 4-3 Republican, and yet that court unanimously elected you as Chief Justice. Doesn't happen that often, but you're pretty well determined to rid the court of any trace of partisanship.
Yeah, I think that's actually the key. I mean, you're right. Justices are nominated by political parties in Michigan, right, but we do run on the nonpartisan section of the ballot, and the court is has to be nonpartisan for it to be effective and for people to believe in what we do.
But that's not the perception people have of courts today, particularly of the Supreme Court.
I think that's sometimes right. I'm hoping it's less and less true, and I think it's true because sometimes people misunderstand why the court is different from the other branches of government and why it's important that it be nonpartisan. The thing about the court is it has to be able to make unpopular decisions, and by that I mean, you know, one day unpopular to one set of partisans and the next day unpopular to the other set of partisans. And if the court is to function in a constitutional democracy the way the founding fathers want it to, it has to be able to do that. So nonpartisanship is really important, even though we have this perception.
And you drove that point home by naming David Viviano, Justice David Viviano, as your Chief Justice pro tem. David was appointed by Governor Rick Snyder, a Republican, and he's going to help you run the court.
And David was twice nominated by the Republican Party. In addition to being first appointed by a Republican governor, he was, you know, twice nominated by a Republican convention. He's a fantastic Chief Justice pro tem. The Supreme Court has actually never had one before, but I thought it was important, both because there's a lot of work to do, and it helps to have somebody else to do it with. And David's a energetic and inspired administrator. But I also like sending the message that this court is not about one party or the other party. It really is a nonpartisan institution, and part of our message is to convince the public of that, even when sometimes the hyper-partisans don't want to believe it, or even sometimes the media, not you.
Yeah, well, maybe me sometimes. But we've seen in Michigan, and even as recently as this summer, outside interest, partisan interest, trying to pressure justices and reminding those justices, well, we nominated you and we supported your campaign. That's unseemly, and it doesn't serve the cause of justice well. And
not only, I mean, I agree with all of that, but it's also true that the public doesn't like it, and we saw that in the results of the election, because the case that you're talking about, that your paper I think broke a lot of the stories about, was Justice Clement, and Justice Clement was the top vote getter in this past election by a whole lot. And frankly, the independence of the judiciary was kind of on the ballot in her campaign. And that's not the only way we know it. We actually have extensive public surveys that the National Center for State Courts does about what the public wants from their state courts. And overwhelmingly this year and every other year, independence is the top thing they want out of their courts. So that's actually what, you know, your non-lawyer family members want out of their courts. It's what my non-lawyer family members want out of their courts. And it's actually probably a small group of partisans that want something different from the court.
And you have politicians in particular throwing around phrases like activist judges and rule of law judges. What do those phrases mean to you?
I mean, an activist judge is a judge who will put his or her personal preferences above what the law requires in a given case. And rule of law judge is usually shorthand for somebody who doesn't do that, right? So, but the bottom line is people use that shorthand sometimes to disparage the other side. And I can tell you that activist judges come in every flavor. You can find them on every side. They're not just Democrats and they're not just Republicans. There are activist judges everywhere, and there are rule of law judges everywhere. So I find those labels to be somewhat unhelpful. Every judge's job is to apply the law to the facts of the case, even when you don't like the outcome. And find me a judge who likes every decision she's ever made, and I promise you she's not a very good judge.
So along with deciding cases and hearing appeals, as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you're basically the administrator for all courts in the state.
And that's actually that's where the action is, in my view. That's where that's the exciting part of the job, and the place where I think we have the ability to affect most people in the public. Most people in the public don't follow the decisions we make, and a lot of times they don't change their lives in one way or the other. Many of the decisions we make, but the way their local courts operate, and whether they can get their business done efficiently and feel like they've been heard and feel like they are getting good customer service at their local courts, that does matter, because everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people have had to go to their local district court or circuit court because they've had an issue with their family or with their business, and they need to know that the courts are going to provide good public service. So frankly, that's the exciting part of this job.
Well, you can see more of Nolan's interview, including Chief Justice McCormack's plans for online dispute resolution and e-filing in Michigan's courts. Just head to our website for that.